I was like, what's wrong with you? You know? Are you unhealthy? And what is it about? I figured out what it's about. What it's about is, where else can you get somebody to listen to you for 45 minutes? We pay for that. We pay $200, $300, $400 an hour to have somebody actually focus. Now, don't necessarily look at the psychologist. They might be doodling on their page and kind of being somewhere else. But you actually listen to them. The story is two psychiatrists. They meet one another. It's 50 years since their it's only 5 years since their high school or their college graduation. They've graduated. One of them looks old and bent over, and the other one is young and powerful and everything. And he says, "What happened to you? It's only a couple of years since we graduated." He says, all those people, they come and they unload, and it's a huge burden. And the other one looks at him and says, "What, you actually listen?" But even having somebody to talk at, and they're not interrupting, it's a very powerful thing. And this goes for the whole, this whole thing of mindfulness, of being in the moment, of living in the moment. It's the most liberating thing. And it's about being in that, finding that purpose. Yeah.
No,
I'm sorry, Nikki.
No, I was just going to say that there's a study that says that the average child from a good home is lucky if they get 15 minutes of undivided attention a day from a parent. And that's a good home.
That is a good home. Yeah. So how can we become a little bit more mindful? How can we become a little more mindful? We're going to go over a little bit, but not too much. How can we be a little more mindful? Last point on this mindfulness. We can have a separate seminar I recommend coming to. We have a Wednesday morning class for ladies. We can have other classes other times where much of this can be discussed at greater length. But just a quick strategy for mindfulness. So people, controlling one's mind, sort of being able to focus, it takes practice. It doesn't come necessarily easy to us, and especially in today's day and age, we have so many things pulling at us from different directions. So one of the things to do, so meditation is a very helpful way to learn to have that kind of discipline and that kind of self-control, to focus on something. But there's a big difference between Eastern meditation and Jewish meditation. In that Eastern meditation, and again I'm going to generalize, Eastern meditation tends to talk about emptying the mind. Talk about emptying the mind, finding that serene place where nothing exists, focusing on it, emptying. It's all about pushing out the distractions and not focusing on them. Jewish meditation is a little bit different, in that Jewish meditation is about focusing on a specific subject. So it's similar in terms that you are meditating. You are blocking out everything that is extraneous to that particular subject. But the point is to focus on a particular subject or idea, that something that engenders purpose, faith, all of those things that we've been talking about till now, and to focus on that subject. So I can tell you that it's actually not necessarily well known. Those who have studied with me in the past may know this, that actually in the Chabad Hasidic world, so from the age, for example, of 12 years old, one of the things that's taught in the discipline with prayer is that prior to prayer, there is the exercise of trying to learn how to do this. So they'll take a concept that was learned and spend 30 seconds focused completely on this topic at 12 years old. And then over time, that grows to a minute, and to 2 minutes, and to 5 minutes, and to 10 minutes, and 15 minutes, up to a half an hour or so. To be able to think deeply, contemplate, meditate on a particular topic. And there's a whole structure to this meditation. There's much written about it. There's entire tracts and teachings on it. But its purpose is to be able to discipline ourselves in order to be able to be mindful. Mindful of what's going on around us, ultimately to be able to focus on prayer, etc. So this is one of the ways in which one can try to practice to be more mindful. I just want to finish with one last point about mindfulness, and that is that people talk about time management. And I think probably Stephen Covey speaks about this. People talk all the time about all kinds of methods for time management. do this and do that, and there's this structure, and there's this kind of calendar, and this kind of date timer, and this, that, and the other. There's huge business that revolves around it. Time management is not about managing time. It's about managing ourselves. That's what time management means. And this is saying exactly the same thing. This is saying get a hold of yourself. This is saying don't allow every little distraction to distract you. And that's easier said than done, granted. But if we want to really lead a life that is more fulfilling and more and happier and less stressful, we can't get around this. We need to learn that focus. And again, one of the ways to do this is through some form of meditation, and Jewish meditation is a whole world unto itself. Final point. Worries. A third element of tremendous stress in our lives. We worry about stuff. What do we worry about? What don't we worry about? We worry about everything. Does it help? Of course it doesn't help. Does it go anywhere? Of course it doesn't go anywhere. It does nothing for us. But we can't help ourselves, but we're worrying. I can't help myself. So what does the Talmud say is they make it seem so simple. The Talmud says, in text 6a, on page 60, the Talmud says, Daiga belev ish yashchena. There's a worry in a person's heart, cast it away. Wow, isn't that genius? Free. Good night. What does it mean, cast it away? This is a passage in the Torah. This is a passage in Proverbs. Cast it away. So the passage seems to be saying that if someone is worried, get the thought out of your mind. Ignore it. Suppress it. Push it away. The Talmud, however, in discussing this passage, says the following. That no, there's actually a difference of opinion as to what this means. Surprise, surprise. Rav Ami and Rav Asi interpreted the verse as follows. One says, cast it away from the mind, push it out. The other one says, Yisichena. He reads the passage slightly different. You know, in the Torah there's no vowels, there's no cantillation, there's no vowels. And so many words can be written or can be read in multiple ways. And so he uses the same letters, and he says, no, vowelize it slightly differently. Vowelize it, Yisichena, which means talk it out. You have worries, you have stress, you have concerns about the future, you have concerns about stuff that's out there, primarily things that are out of our control, by the way. That's the kind of stuff that worries us, because otherwise you go and roll up your sleeves and do something about it. Talk it out. So, what is the idea of talking it out? So, many people, and like I said earlier, that we go to a psychologist, we go to a psychiatrist to talk about concerns, issues, whatever, and people can talk about worries too. So what's the value in talking about a worry? There are three basic values in talking to a friend about a worry that I may have. Number one, a friend can provide some clear, sound advice. You have a good friend, a thoughtful person, they can help you with advice. Number two, just articulating the issue, laying it out, can provide the answer for itself. When I counsel people, the best counseling I do is when I sit there and I listen and they say, thank you, Rabbi, you helped me so much. And I say, you're welcome. I don't say a word. The less I say, the better. But it's true that just talking through it, and I'm sure this is happen with everybody, a friend will say, you know what, thank you for listening. Thank you for hearing me out. It helped me. I got clarity on the issue. Talking about it. Get it out there. And finally, the empathy that we show to one another when we hear of people's concerns or worries, the empathy itself has an effect. Knowing that they're loved, knowing that people will accept them the way they are with all of the concerns that they may have, that alone is a very, very powerful antidote to a person's worries. It doesn't address perhaps the issue directly, but the environment of knowing that you have a loved one who cares, that alone is extremely profound. Talk about having a shoulder to lean on, somebody to cry with. Whatever it is, It's a similar idea. There's a feeling of being embraced that's a very powerful experience. So, another story. There was a chassid who wrote to the Tzemach Tzedek. By the way, you're going to be tested on all these names. That's on the continuing education credits there. Nothing on the content, just on the names. So, this chassid, he had a lot of worries. He had worries about his job, and he had worries about his kids. He was like a regular guy. And so he followed what the Talmud said, and so he spoke out his worries to his Rebbe, his mentor. He wrote him a letter. This was way back in the day, in the 1700s, excuse me, the 1800s, and he wrote him a letter. Here is the Rebbe's response to him. It's very interesting because he wrote the letter sort of employing the second idea in the Talmud to speak it out. And the Tzemach Tzedek, as we'll see, he answers him, push the worries away like the first answer of the Talmud. And he's going to help him, he's going to guide him in how to do this. How do you push worries away? This is the guidance from the friend or from the mentor telling him how to do this. I'm responding to your letter. This is text 7 on page 62. I'm responding to your letter in which you write about your fears. Starts out right away from the beginning, though they are very much unwarranted. You've been granted the choice and the authority to think, speak, and act according to what you consciously desire. Even if you experience the emotion of fear, you're able to remove your thoughts, speech, and actions from that emotion. The essential thing is not to think or speak about this fear at all. Immediately upon not thinking about it, the fear will automatically dissipate. At the very least, the fear will become dormant and will not be felt in your body. And over the course of a few days, it will completely dissipate to the point that it won't come up in your mind at all. The reason that the removal of thought nullifies the fear is because all emotions are sustained by the mind, through the medium of thought. Therefore, by removing the thought, the mind is disconnected from the emotion, and the emotion is no longer aroused. So, one second, he's not done yet, and hang in there, I see the concerns here on people's faces, Michael. So thoughts produce and nurture emotions. If we remove the thought process, it can help us allow the emotions to dissipate. However, there's a major problem here. And the problem here is, as Dostoevsky writes, try to pose for yourself this task. Not to think of a polar bear. Okay, imagine a polar bear. Now don't think about the polar bear. And you'll see that the cursed thing will come to mind every minute. And by the way, there's a famous study from Daniel Wegner, which is a very noted psychology professor who does this test, and he wanted to test this assumption. And he asked his participants to consciously, for 5 minutes, not to think of a polar bear. And then he had this little bell, and he said, as soon as you think about the polar bear, ring the bell. And of course, if we would do it here, I'd do it with clapping, and soon the whole place would be filled with applause, right? Because if you don't think about the pink elephant. There is no such thing as a pink elephant. It doesn't matter. There's an image now of a pink elephant that you shouldn't be thinking about. So what happens is the mind, even when we turn our mind away from it, what happens is that the mind checks itself constantly. And it checks itself to make sure it's not going to think about what it's not supposed to think about. And in the process, thinks about it. So what do we do? And this is what the Tzemach Tzedek responds. He continues. He says, the primary method, this is text 9, of removing negative thoughts from your mind is by directing your mind towards other matters. There's no such thing as trying to take a broom and have it, sweep out your head. Your head is active. It needs to be full. An empty head, in Yiddish there's a saying, ledige hand, empty hands, well, there's a saying in English too, right? It breeds, I don't know what, all kinds of problems. An empty mind is a dangerous thing. An empty mind will get into trouble. It will get into trouble. So if we're not mindful, if we're not purpose-driven, if we're not thinking about our mission, if I think I just happen to be stuck here, and now I'm going to let my mind wander, where's it going to go? It's going to go to the worries. It's automatic. It fills up with garbage, with just foolishness. Unless I choose to focus it somewhere. So I can say, well, stop worrying. Just stop worrying. Banish the thought from the mind. You can't banish the thought from the mind unless you fill it with something. And so his continued response is, you're worried. Okay, stop worrying and choose to take your mind, take your hand, stick it in your brain, and turn it in a different direction. Oh, but I can't. I keep thinking about it. I can't. You hear kids say that. I can't stop thinking about it. But that's a misnomer. We are able to choose what we think about. You might need to find something engaging. You might need to find something, it might even be uncomfortable, what you choose to think about. It might be somewhere that's difficult to go in your mind. But by actively choosing to think about, to focus your mind somewhere else, automatically that will help dissipate these concerns that are, and as most concerns, they're something we don't have an influence over. Okay. I'm trying to finish by 9 o'clock. So, 3 ideas here tonight. We're talking about the stresses of life. Sorry?
I have to object.
Go ahead.
The readings of the last 2 pages are, in my mind, are conjuring up somebody with obsessions, with compulsions, with chronic anxiety syndrome, and to just say to that individual, you just need to think it through and you need to turn that off, is unsuccessful. It doesn't work.
Okay. So we are not talking about somebody with a clinical condition. I guess I should have, you're right, I should have introduced that to start with. We're not talking about somebody with a clinical condition. We're talking about, I was going to say you and me, but that may be assuming something. I don't know. I'm sorry. We're talking about most of the people here in this room, I assume, because I would say we're all average. Whereas the Jewish mother say, right? We're all above average, right? So none of us have any condition like this. We're talking about, we're not talking about crazy stresses that is putting somebody in a hospital or on medication right now. We're talking about the everyday worries and stresses of life that we just constantly worry about. The kinds of things that keep you up at night just because your mind is racing, what if? That's the kind of thing we're talking about. The guy has a concern, what happens if my boss doesn't like the last assignment that I did, and maybe I know they're laying people off, and maybe I'm in that group, and what should I do about it? Not as if I can do anything about it. I've done everything I can. I've worked it to the bone. I've done everything that was asked of me. I did it to the best of my ability. But I'm worrying. It's natural for me. There's a void. I'm worrying. My brain is empty right now. I'm trying to go to sleep. I can't because my mind won't stop working. My kid is traveling. What if? You know how dangerous the world is out there? There's Ebola out there. And I start to think, and my God, and now not only is something going to happen to my kid, it's going to happen to his roommate, it's going to happen to the whole college, and then they're going to blame me. I don't know. Is there any end to the kinds of worries that we have? And so and by the way, it's not easy to get a hold of ourselves with these worries. I don't have to tell you. It's difficult. And not most of the time, all of the time, virtually all of the time, the worry, there's nothing positive, there's nothing healthy about worry. One of 2 things. Either it will happen or it won't. My worrying about it will have absolutely no effect whatsoever on the outcome. The only thing it will have an effect on is me. It will make me not sleep tonight, and I will be more stressed tomorrow morning, and this will be a vicious cycle. So now the question is, how do I get a hold of myself? I'd like to get a hold of myself. Okay? So there's no rocket science here. There's a whole other part here about trust in God, which we're not going to get into. We don't have the time right now. But even the most basic idea, take a concept, take something that you can focus on, you are not a slave to your worries. That might be news to some people, not intellectually, but that actually for me, I can do that. I have the choice whether or not to stress and obsess over things, or I can choose to say, I am going to go in a different direction. And I believe that whatever comes, let's go back to what we started from the beginning, whatever comes, will have purpose in it. There is a lesson, there is something for me to do, regardless of what the boss decides. And when that happens, I will be in that moment, and I will be mindful, and I will find and suck out of that moment in life, or out of that situation in life, everything it has to offer. And I will do my mission, I will work on trying to find in that circumstance everything I can. And it's time to go to bed. Good night. And that's it. That's the whole, I'm not saying it's easy. And the reason I say it's not easy is because we all do it anyway. But here is at least the beginning to know, I hope you'll walk out of here tonight to know that at least we have the possibility of deciding to change that. For the clinical person, they need medication to help. For the rest of us, that's not an excuse. For the rest of us, those of us who are not diagnosed, we can and should endeavor to change that. We don't have to be a slave to our circumstances. And in fact, that really is the summation of everything we're talking about tonight. Not about being stuck in the airport, and not about all of the things that are coming in our through, that are hitting us from all different sides, and not about the worries. We do not have to be passively sort of taking it all in, and no matter what comes, we're falling apart and we're losing it. Instead, get a hold of ourselves. We are here for a reason. Everything that we face is here for a reason. Let's find our mission in each of it, in every circumstance. Let's actively engage in the moment. And if you need a little meditation in the morning to help you with that, great. Excellent. Throw in a little exercise and some good eating too. And stop worrying. It's not going to help. And you can choose to stop worrying. That's what he told me. Ladies and gentlemen,